Most people believe that a lack of discipline is a character flaw, a weak, shameful trait, something that some have and others do not. However, this view is completely misguided. What few people know is that discipline, as it is generally understood, goes against the way the human brain is designed to operate. And this is not a metaphor, it is a neurobiological fact. The brain did not evolve to prioritize long term goals, abstract targets, or heroic self control. It evolved for one thing: immediate survival. Over millions of years, humans adapted to conserve energy, seek quick rewards, and avoid any unnecessary effort. In other words, your brain does not want you to go to the gym. It wants you to stay on the couch because that saves energy. It does not want you to write an article or study. So it wants you to open TikTok because dopamine comes faster. And this is not a defect, it is simply biology. The problem is that modern society demands just the opposite. To thrive, we are expected to be disciplined, productive, and consistent. But this creates an internal conflict. On one side, a brain that has been shaped to act like a lazy hunter-gatherer. On the other, a world that demands behavior from a focused and resilient supercomputer. When someone tries to force discipline through willpower, they are in practice trying to overcome millions of years of evolutionary programming with a handful of motivational phrases. And guess what? It does not work, at least not for long. James Clear, author of the bestseller Atomic Habits, revealed one of the deepest insights about modern human behavior. Real discipline does not come from force, it comes from design. The most consistent people, those who seem disciplined, are actually not stronger or more motivated. They have simply created systems and environments that make the right behavior easy, automatic, and inevitable. They do not fight against the brain, they manipulate it. In the next few minutes, we will dismantle the illusion of discipline, expose the mistakes you did not even know you were making, and build together a new way of thinking and acting. A smarter way, more human, more effective. If you have ever felt weak for procrastinating, if you have ever hated yourself for not being able to stick to your own plans, this video will not judge you. It will show you that you were just trying the wrong way, and now finally you will understand the right way. Discipline as a concept seems simple in theory. Just want something enough, stay focused, and resist temptation. But when we look at how the human brain actually works, we realize that this view is not only simplistic, but completely naive. This is because your brain is not interested in your long-term goals. It is focused on survival, comfort, and energy efficiency. And if you do not understand this, you will live in conflict with it. For most of human evolution, our ancestors lived in hostile environments where resource scarcity was the norm and the only priority was to survive until the next day. In this scenario, the brain adapted to prioritize immediate rewards. Eating now was more important than storing for later. Sleeping more was safer than exposing oneself to risks. Avoiding effort meant conserving energy for critical moments. The brain was calibrated generation after generation to seek the quickest, most pleasurable, and least costly path. And guess what? This software still runs in you today. When you try to wake up early to go to the gym, your brain interprets this as a threat to comfort and energy conservation. When you open your laptop to study or work on a project, it immediately suggests that you just take a quick look at social media because there, pleasure is instant, predictable, and guaranteed. Going to the gym, reading a technical book, writing an article, that requires effort without immediate reward. The brain hates that, and here is the most important detail. Your brain is not rational, it is efficient. It does not choose what is best in the long term, but what requires less energy right now. This is what neuroscience calls cognitive ease. The brain's tendency to always choose the path of least resistance, and this choice is not conscious. It happens even before you decide. The problem, therefore, is not a lack of willpower, it is a design conflict. Your brain wants to survive and feel good now. You want to evolve and grow in the long term. And as long as these two goals are not reconciled, you will continue to feel frustrated, tired, and unsuccessful. James Clear sums this up brilliantly. Motivation is overrated. Environment is more important. In other words, if you constantly need to rely on willpower, it means you are fighting against the natural structure of your brain. And that is a battle you will lose, always, because over time, fatigue wins. And when you are tired, your brain goes back to autopilot, and the autopilot always chooses the easiest path. So if you really want to change, the first step is not to try harder. The first step is to understand what you are dealing with. And now that you know your brain is programmed to sabotage any attempt at forced discipline, an inevitable question arises. What if the problem is not you, but the environment you live in? In the next part, we will explore why your environment is, in fact, the true architect of your behaviors, and how you can manipulate it to work in your favor. Now that you understand that your brain is designed to seek the easiest path, we need to look at the true battleground where this decision takes place, the environment around you. Most people believe that self-control is an inner strength, a kind of moral muscle that just needs to be strengthened. But the truth, as James Clear revealed, is much more uncomfortable. Where self-control is fragile, and it crumbles in the face of a poorly designed environment. Think about this. You decide to start working out. You're motivated, determined, ready to change your life. But when you wake up, your workout clothes are crumpled at the bottom of the drawer. Your sneakers are in the trunk of the car. It is cold outside. Meanwhile, the couch is 3 steps from the bed. Your phone is in your hand and Instagram is already open. The choice is no longer between good and bad. The choice is between what is available and easy and what is hidden and laborious. And the brain, as we have seen, always chooses what requires less effort. That is the real problem. You are trying to change your behavior while maintaining an environment that encourages the opposite. And this is where the concept that has changed the way thousands of people understand discipline comes in: choice architecture. This term, used by Clear, shows that human behavior is shaped by what is closest, most accessible, and most visible. It is not a matter of strength. It is a matter of behavioral engineering. Want an example? In a study cited by Clear, the simple change of position of water bottles in a cafeteria, placing them at the front instead of the back, increased water consumption and reduced soda consumption without any motivational campaign or prohibition. What changed? The environment. The decision became easier. And when a healthy decision becomes the simplest option, the brain does not resist. It follows. Now imagine applying this to your own life. Want to read more? Leave the book on the bed, not in the drawer. Want to stop getting distracted by your phone? Turn off notifications, hide the device, use blocking apps. Want to wake up and work out? Leave your clothes ready next to the bed, as if you were setting a trap, but this time against your own laziness, because deep down, this is what you need to understand. Discipline does not come from effort, it comes from preparation. But preparation alone is not enough, because even when you design your environment perfectly, even when the book is on the pillow and the gym clothes are laid out and the phone is in the other room, there is still something deeper working against you. Something that no amount of environmental design can fully fix on its own. And that is the story you tell yourself about who you are. Here is something that most productivity advice completely ignores. Your behavior is not driven by your goals, it is driven by your identity. What you do every day is a direct reflection of what you believe about yourself. And if you believe, even subconsciously, that you are the kind of person who is lazy, undisciplined, or incapable of consistency, then no system, no app, no morning routine will save you. Because the brain is not just seeking comfort. It is also seeking consistency with your self-image. It will always find a way to behave in alignment with who it thinks you are. James Clear calls this identity-based habits, and it is one of the most powerful ideas in the entire field of behavioral psychology. He argues that most people set outcome-based goals. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to write a book. I want to save money. And they fail not because the goal is wrong, but because they never changed the underlying belief. They never became the person for whom that goal is a natural result. Think about the difference between two people who are offered a cigarette. The first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." The second person says, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." Same action, completely different identity. The first person is fighting against a habit. The second person is simply acting in accordance with who they are. And that difference, subtle as it sounds, changes everything. This is not about positive thinking or repeating affirmations in the mirror. This is about understanding that every small action you take is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. Every time you sit down to write even one paragraph, you are casting a vote for the identity of a writer. Every time you choose the salad over the fries, you are casting a vote for the identity of someone who takes care of their body. Every time you open the book instead of the phone, you are casting a vote for the identity of a curious and disciplined person. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to win every vote. You just need to win the majority. Because over time, once those votes accumulate into a reputation you build with yourself, and that reputation becomes the foundation of real, lasting discipline. Not the forced, white-knuckled kind. The effortless kind that flows from simply being who you have decided to become. Now here is where it gets really interesting. Because once you begin to shift your identity, something neurological happens. Your brain starts to rewire itself. And this is not a metaphor, this is literal neuroscience. Every time you repeat a behavior, the neural pathway associated with that behavior gets stronger. The signal travels faster, the action becomes easier, more automatic, less draining. Scientists call this long-term potentiation. The neurons that fire together wire together. And what this means for you is that discipline, practiced consistently, it stops feeling like discipline at all. It starts to feel like just what you do, like breathing, like a default. But there is a trap here that almost everyone falls into, and it is the trap of going too big too fast. You feel a surge of motivation, maybe after watching a video like this one, and you decide that starting tomorrow you'll wake up at 5 in the morning, work out for an hour, meditate for 30 minutes, read for an hour, and journal before breakfast. And for 3 days it works. You feel incredible. You feel like a new person. And then on day 4 something happens. You are tired or stressed, or it rains, and the whole structure collapses, and you feel worse than before you started, because now you've added failure to your story. This is what researchers call the all or nothing trap. And it is one of the primary reasons why people never build lasting discipline. They confuse intensity with consistency. They mistake the feeling of motivation for the building of a habit. And when the motivation fades, and it always fades, there is nothing left to hold the behavior in place. The solution is almost embarrassingly simple. Start so small that failure becomes nearly impossible. James Clear calls this the 2-minute rule. When you want to build a new habit, reduce it to something that takes 2 minutes or less. Want to start running? Just put on your shoes and walk to the end of the driveway. That is it. Want to start meditating? Just sit quietly and breathe for 2 minutes. Want to read more? Just open the book and read 1 page. The goal is not the outcome. The goal is the appearance. The goal is to show up. Because showing up, even in the smallest possible way, casts a vote for the identity you are building. And over time, the 2 minutes naturally expand. Not because you force them to, but because the identity pulls you forward. Think of it like a flywheel. At first, it takes enormous effort to get it moving. Every push feels like it barely makes a difference. But if you keep pushing, if you keep showing up, the wheel begins to gain momentum. And eventually it is spinning on its own. And your job is no longer to push it, but simply not to stop it. That is what discipline feels like when it is built correctly. Not a daily battle of willpower, a system that carries you forward, almost on its own. And this connects to something that neuroscientists have been studying for decades, the role of dopamine in habit formation. Now, and most people think dopamine is the pleasure chemical, the thing your brain releases when something feels good. But that is only half the story. Dopamine is actually released in anticipation of a reward, not just during the reward itself. It is the chemical of wanting, not just having. And this distinction is enormously important when it comes to building discipline. When you consistently pair a behavior with a positive signal, even a small one, your brain begins to release dopamine before you even start the behavior. The anticipation itself becomes pleasurable. You start to look forward to the gym, not because the workout is easy, but because your brain has learned that going to the gym is associated with feeling strong, proud, and alive. You start to look forward to writing, not because it is effortless, but because your brain has learned that sitting at the desk is associated with the deep satisfaction of creation. The behavior stops being a sacrifice. It becomes something your brain actually craves. This is the secret that no motivational poster will ever tell you. Discipline, real discipline, is not about forcing yourself to do hard things. It is about engineering your life so that your brain begins to desire the right things. And that engineering happens at 3 levels. The level of your environment, the level of your identity, and the level of your neurological reward system. Get all 3 working in the same direction. And discipline stops being something you chase. It becomes something you live. But knowing all of this is still not enough. Because there is one more enemy standing between you and the life you want. And it is the most subtle, the most invisible, and the most dangerous of all. It is not laziness. It is not weakness. It is not even your environment or your identity. It is the unconscious patterns, the automatic loops of thought and behavior that run in the background of your mind every single day, shaping your choices before you even realize a choice is being made. And in the final part, we are going to expose those patterns, dismantle them, and replace them with something far more powerful. Every single day, from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you fall asleep, your brain is running programs, not the kind you choose consciously, not the kind you are aware of, the kind that were installed years ago, sometimes decades ago, through repetition, through experience, through the environments you grew up in, through the people who raised you, through every failure you ever had, and every story you told yourself about why it happened. These are your unconscious patterns, and they are running your life far more than your goals, your intentions, or your motivation ever will. Neuroscientists estimate that approximately 95% of human behavior is driven by the subconscious mind. That means that only 5% of what you do in a day is a result of deliberate conscious decision making. And the other 95% is automatic. It is pattern. It is habit. It is the invisible architecture of your inner world expressing itself through your outer actions. And here is the brutal truth that most self-help content will never say out loud. If your unconscious patterns are working against you, all the goal setting, all the vision boards, all the morning routines, all the productivity hacks in the world will not save you, because you will keep sabotaging yourself and you will not even know why. You will set the alarm and still hit snooze. You will plan the diet and still reach for the sugar. You will open the document and still find yourself scrolling 20 minutes later. And each time it happens, you will feel a familiar mix of confusion and shame because you genuinely wanted to do the right thing. You just could not. And the reason is not weakness. The reason is that your conscious intention came into direct conflict with a deeply wired unconscious pattern. And in that battle, the unconscious wins almost every time. Not because it is stronger in some mystical sense, but because it has had more practice, because it has been reinforced thousands of times, because it is fast and automatic while your conscious mind is slow and deliberate. So how do you change a pattern you cannot even see? The first step, and this is crucial, is awareness. You cannot change what you do not observe. And most people move through their days on autopilot, reacting to triggers without ever pausing to notice the loop they are caught in. The psychologist Charles Duhigg, in his landmark work on habit science, described what he called the habit loop. And that every automatic behavior follows the same three-part structure. There is a cue, something in your environment or your emotional state that triggers the behavior. There is a routine, the behavior itself, the automatic action your brain takes in response to the cue. And there is a reward, the payoff your brain receives that reinforces the loop and makes it more likely to repeat. For example, you sit down at your desk to work. That is the cue. You feel a flicker of anxiety about the task ahead. Your brain immediately seeks relief. You open your phone and start scrolling. That is the routine. The anxiety fades for a moment. That is the reward. And your brain files this away. Next time you sit at the desk and feel anxious, it will reach for the phone again, not because you decided to, because the loop ran itself. To the moment you can see this loop clearly, something shifts. You are no longer just a passenger. You become the observer. And the observer has power that the passenger never had. Because once you see the cue, you can interrupt the routine before it runs. You can insert a pause, however brief, between the trigger and the response. And in that pause lives your freedom. But interrupting the loop is only half the work, because the brain does not like a vacuum. If you remove a behavior without replacing the reward it was providing, the loop will reassert itself. You will resist for a while and then snap back. This is why cold turkey approaches almost never work long term. The craving does not disappear. It just waits. What you need to do is not eliminate the loop, but reshape it. Keep the cue, keep the reward. But change the routine to something that serves you rather than sabotages you. This is called habit substitution. And it is one of the most evidence-backed strategies in all of behavioral science. The anxiety of sitting down to work is still there. But instead of reaching for the phone, you reach for a glass of water and take 3 slow breaths. The reward, a momentary reduction in anxiety, is the same, but the routine no longer pulls you off track. Over time, the new routine becomes just as automatic as the old one. The loop rewires itself, and what once felt like an unbreakable pattern becomes something you barely even notice anymore, because it no longer runs in the direction of self-destruction. Now let us talk about something even deeper, because beneath the habit loops, beneath the unconscious patterns, there is a layer that almost nobody addresses, and that is the emotional fuel that powers all of it. Every chronic pattern of avoidance, every loop of procrastination, every moment of self-sabotage is being driven by an emotion, usually an uncomfortable one: fear, shame, inadequacy, boredom, overwhelm. The behavior, whatever it is, scrolling, snacking, sleeping too much, starting arguments, avoiding difficult conversations, is not the problem. It is the solution your brain invented to manage an emotion it did not know how to face directly. And this is where the conversation about discipline becomes something much more honest and much more human. Because you're not lazy, you're avoiding something. You are not weak, you're protecting yourself from something that at some level feels threatening. And until you understand what that something is, you will keep finding new ways to avoid it, no matter how many habits you build or environments you redesign. The most disciplined people in the world are not people who feel no fear or discomfort. They are people who have learned to feel those things and move anyway. They have developed what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to sit with an uncomfortable emotion without immediately acting to escape it. And this capacity, more than any habit or system, is the true foundation of lasting discipline. Because when you can tolerate the discomfort of starting, the discomfort of continuing when it gets hard, the discomfort of being imperfect, and doing it anyway, nothing can stop you. Not a bad day, not a setback, not a season of difficulty. So how do you build this capacity? And in the same way you build any capacity, gradually, intentionally, through repeated exposure to small doses of discomfort that you choose to move through rather than run from. Every time you sit with the urge to procrastinate and do the work anyway, even for 5 minutes, you are building distress tolerance. Every time you feel the pull of the phone and choose to stay present with the task, you are strengthening the muscle. Every time you feel the weight of resistance and take one small step forward regardless, you are training your nervous system to know that discomfort is survivable, that it is not a signal to retreat, but a signal that something meaningful is happening. And here is what nobody tells you about that process. It gets easier, not because the discomfort disappears, but because your relationship with it changes. What once felt like an unbearable obstacle starts to feel like familiar territory, like a challenge you have faced before and survived, like something that is part of the process rather than a sign that something has gone wrong. And at that point, a profound transformation has taken place. You are no longer a person who needs discipline from the outside, from rules and systems and accountability partners and motivational videos. You have become a person who carries discipline on the inside, a person for whom doing hard things is simply part of who they are. This is the destination, not perfection, not superhuman productivity, not a life without struggle, but a life in which you are no longer at war with yourself, a life in which your values and your actions are finally aligned, or a life in which the person you want to be and the person you actually are have grown close enough to shake hands. And the path there is not through force or shame or the desperate search for more willpower. It is through understanding, through design, through identity, through the patient, compassionate, consistent work of rewiring the brain one small choice at a time. You started this video perhaps believing that discipline was something you either had or you did not, a fixed trait, a genetic lottery, a character quality reserved for a special kind of person. But now you know the truth. Discipline is not a trait, it is a practice. It is not something you are born with. It is something you build, slowly, imperfectly, but with every single day offering you a new set of opportunities to cast votes for the person you are becoming. Now, your brain is not your enemy. It is simply running old software in a new world. And you now have something most people never get, a clear understanding of how that software works and how to update it. Not through brute force, not through shame, but through the intelligent, patient, deliberate redesign of your environment, your identity, your habits, and your relationship with discomfort. The question is no longer whether you are capable of discipline. You are. The question is simply whether you are willing to begin, not perfectly, not dramatically, just honestly, just today, just one small step in the direction of the person you have already decided to become. Because that decision made quietly without fanfare, without anyone watching, is where everything starts. And everything, in the end, starts exactly there.